Welcome back to the channel. I've got a special treat for you guys today. Behind me is a 1993 Special Service Vehicle Mustang, formerly owned by the RCMP here in Canada. I'm going to introduce you to the guy who owns the car. We'll tell you a little bit about the modifications on the car and the history of the car, and I'm going to give you a close look at one of these very special Mustangs. All right, well, thanks for coming in, Ryan.
Yeah,
really
no
appreciate it. We've got a very special car sitting behind us, which you are the owner of. It's a Police Interceptor, or SSV, is that correct?
Yeah, it's an old SSP car that a friend of mine owned way back in the day, and then I bought it from him just recently, so I just brought it back to life. It's been sitting for a few years out of service. So.
Now, it's not just an SSV car, it's a Canadian SSV car, right? This would have been owned by the RCMP?
Yep, that's right. As the car traded hands, probably it's on its fourth owner now, me, and 3 of those 4 owners are all in the same circle of friends and family since it was picked up in early 2000s, I think. So.
Right, so it probably was in service for like 7 or 8 years, and then sold on, and it's more or less been in the family since, eh?
Yeah, exactly. And then after about 13 years, I got tired of looking at it when I went to visit him, so I finally just said, hey, I think it's time for that to pass the torch, so let me be an owner, and I'll restore it to somewhat of its glory. So here we are.
Okay, so this car originally would have been a 5-liter car, but now it is a 347, right?
Now it's a 347 car, just with average bolt-ons, mild cam, heads cam intake, and still has 355 gears. That was in it, one of the only mods before the motor was changed, and that's how it sits today.
Okay, now for my viewers who are not that familiar with the SSV cars, there were a small number of differences between these cars and the production cars, but there was quite a variation in them. Like, I know quite a few of them were ordered with power windows and locks, but this is a crank window manual lock car. Can you tell me a few of the other special discerning features on it?
Yeah, like your basic special service package cars, which weren't specifically for police. They all kind of came with standard equipment. This one came manual everything. The only option it had was AC, manual windows, manual locks, manual seats. This police package had the trunk button moved over to the driver's side so you can access it instead of reaching over the glove box. It has your mounts, placement for radio, shotgun mounts, that kind of thing. It'll have a heavier alternator, beefier springs, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Now, I've had a little bit of a look over the car, and I think one of the things that guys liked on these cars was most of them had an engine oil cooler. That looks like it's not on the car, probably changed out when the motor was changed out.
Yeah, when it traded the first few guys' hands, it was a stock everything. When it went to the second most recent owner, a good friend of mine, the only modifications he did was open up the exhaust. It still had a full cat exhaust on it. He changed all that out. I don't know if it had an oil cooler on it then when he had it, but it was still stock motor, and he did gears in the back, and that was it. And then I think the person that took it off of his hands put a supercharger on that stock engine, and of course, went the way of most cars that weren't properly tuned, and that motor had a very short-lived life with a supercharger on it, and then the 347 went into it. And so with it is all kinds of new questionable things that pops up with it. So.
Right, so I know one of the things that I looked at pretty carefully when the car came in is the balancer, because it has a production 50-ounce balancer on it. And it's a 347, and almost none of these 347s use a 50-ounce balance. However, this motor is a very early 347 stroker, right? Like 20 years old,
yeah,
or 15, maybe more?
15 for sure, upwards of 20. It'd be somewhere in that early 2000s vintage, so whatever would have been around in the day. And that was a used motor. It was kind of like that motor blew up, and the guy who owned it knew a guy who had a motor sitting around that used to be in a car. It's one of those stories. So he picked it up, dropped it in here, and it looked like it was as quickly tossed in there and sold. And then when my friend before me bought it, he was chasing a lot of demons out, and then gave up on it, hence why it sat for 13 years. And then I inherited the demons, which I think we're all demon free now.
Yeah, well, it gives me fits when guys show up with a 347 car and I see that stock balancer, especially if you come from a long way away, because I think, oh, what a waste of a trip, because we might not be able to get a balancer in same day or whatever. However, ran the car right up. It doesn't shake, so it must be right. And there were a small number of very early 347s that were assembled with 50-ounce imbalance. So, but for most of you guys, if you have a 347, make sure you don't just go to the parts store and say, give me a balancer for a 5-liter Mustang, because it'll be the wrong one. So what do you know about the police interceptor badges on the side of the car? That's not something that was originally on the Mustang. I was guessing that they were probably off a Crown Vic.
Most likely. That's something that a friend of mine that I picked it up off of slapped on there just to pay homage to trying to keep the original. He liked the clean, simple look and didn't want to stray too far from SSP stuff. So I think he put that on there, and yeah.
I got a friend here in Calgary who has an Edmonton Mountie SSV car, and that car has a Caprice badge on the back. So there's all kinds of these funny badges that were put on, that weren't put on by Ford, but are not at all uncommon on SSV Mustangs.
This particular one I know, again, keep referencing the second previous owner as my friend. When he picked the car up from the original owner who got it from the auction, he said you could still see faded in the clear coat the Guy on the Horse RCMP logo down the rear quarter, which has all since now been either touched up, buffed out, or just faded with age as the car. Actually, the clear coat was quite bad over the winter when I looked at it last year, and I put a weekend's worth of half-ass polishing into it, and we were shocked that it actually came back. It's quite dirty and dusty now after being trailered from Saskatchewan to here, and but it actually came back quite well. If I hose it off, it will retain some of its luster, but that emblem is all since faded. You won't see it now. We tried to pick it up again, but
I had a little look for the ghosting of badging on this car, and I couldn't see any, but I did see a little round mark where probably the light mounts were welded up on top of the car, just on one side.
There's a few dings that shows its age and marks here and there, yeah, for sure.
And there's some holes cut in the center console, which I'm guessing were for switches for lights and siren, that kind of stuff.
Be like your shotgun release if it had electronics back then, maybe not, or yeah, your roof lights, sirens, controls like that. Yeah.
Now, did you ever drive a Mustang in police service?
No, but funny story, somewhere around Saskatoon area, or Swift Current area, I got pulled over driving my first Mustang, which was a Fox body, 89, and I think it had headlight covers on it, and I got pulled over by an RCMP car, which was not this one, but exactly like it, fully marked and roof lights in Swift Current, and I didn't care. I was getting the ticket. I was just too happy to jump out down in the Tuoleys and got him to pose and took a picture of police car, Mustang, pull over Mustang, but no, that's the closest experience I've had with a Mustang one. So.
Did he cut you a break for being a fellow Mustang guy?
No, he just said he should have brought the Camaro out that day, and I just said, well, I wouldn't have stopped. And he's like, I would have caught you. And then he laughed, and I said, no, you wouldn't. So we kind of did one of those, but yeah.
Yeah, the old, do you know why I stopped you? Because I let you?
Yeah.
Now, here's another thing you told me while we were out for lunch today, and that is you have a tattoo of the Mustang logo and the VIN of your first Mustang, right? Now, yeah. I know I'm a pretty hardcore Mustang guy. That's some pretty hardcore stuff, man.
I get beaked about it to this day. It was my first tattoo, and I have no shame. I love my tattoos. I get beaked about them all the time, but that one was, that's the VIN off that same black car that I got pulled over in, which was the start of the sickness, if you want to call it, which has now been 20 odd years later, and I'm into my third or fourth Fox body. So that one just kind of is there. That's what set the bar when I got into the car scene, and Fox bodies was the way to go. Like, I've owned a few. I had an 08 Cali Special and a 13 Boss 302, but here I am back to the Fox bodies again. It was just a opportunity to get back into it. So yeah, they're just great bang for your buck. This one, I'm glad that we got it where we did now. This trip was just to be a simple cruiser. I wasn't looking for big power numbers or nothing coming out of supercharged and turbocharged cars. And then you jump into something that's just putting out this power level, but it's clean, it's safe. It's just something that boot around for a couple of years, and the plan is, I really wanted this car just for the body, because it's hard to find a clean, straight car, and this one is still pretty good, and it's solid. I mean, you can just feel it open and closing the doors, and you get underneath it. Body lines are relatively close. So this one will just be a fun car to bang around town and just be reliable and safe. And then when the time comes, it'll be a full gut job, and then start with most likely something like a Coyote or a Godzilla or something like that. So the purists would cringe at that when I say I'm going to take an SSP car and just turn it into just completely modified, but I don't have any real big link to it being a former service car as sad as it is. I would much rather, my dream car was always a Fox body with a big modular engine in it, which was going to be a Coyote swap. And now, since we've evolved to the Godzilla, it'd be silly not to look at those options. So that's what I think.
Everybody I know who bought an SSV car when they were being auctioned off by the police, bought it so they could modify and race it.
Yeah.
That's every single guy I know who did that. So there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. I think that's the heritage of these cars. And you know, they're a very special car, like the Stripper Coupes that were specially ordered in the Winnipeg area, or the 41X cars. These are another well sought after and really special car. So I appreciate you sharing it with us today.
No worries.
This graph shows a comparison of this combination to a stock 5.0 on the same dyno. Using our standard conversion, this equates to about 373 flywheel horsepower. Using the power ratio times Ford's stated stock horsepower of 225, this equates to 377 flywheel horsepower. Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, hit that notification bell so that you won't miss out on future videos.